Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we really got into that dual process idea, didn't we? System 1, System 2, the fast intuition versus the slow
Right.
analysis.
Kahneman's framework, essentially, foundational stuff.
Absolutely. But we left off with this nagging question. Is that it? Is there maybe a third layer? A System 3, perhaps? Something that, manages the other two?
Uh, like a conductor for the cognitive orchestra.
Exactly. So, based on the materials you sent over, our goal for this deep dive is to explore that. Is this System 3 idea floating around out there already? Does it, exist in the research, maybe just under different labels?
Well, that's the interesting part. You won't find System 3 plastered on chapter headings universally. Not yet, anyway. But yeah, the sources definitely show people have been thinking along these lines. There are some significant models and precedents that touch on something beyond just S1 and S2.
Okay, good. Let's unpack this then. Because honestly, that idea of something deciding whether to trust your gut or hit the brakes and analyze, that feels intuitively right, doesn't it? Like, where does that decision happen?
Precisely. And that question leads us very nicely into one of the key examples from the sources,
Yeah,
the work of Keith Stanovich.
Stanovich. Right, his name comes up a lot when you talk about rationality or, well, the lack of it sometimes.
Exactly. He's crucial here. He proposed a tri-process model, which is highly relevant. His big move was basically to take System 2, that deliberate thinking part, and say, hang on, it's not just one thing. He splits it.
He split System 2. Okay, how? What are the pieces?
So the first is what he calls the algorithmic mind. Think of this as the raw computational power. Logic, reasoning, running calculations. The stuff IQ tests often try to measure.
The processing engine.
Pretty much. But then, crucially, there's the reflective mind. This is sort of a higher level. It's about your goals, your thinking styles, critically evaluating your own thoughts. And it's the part that decides if and when to actually fire up that algorithmic engine.
Okay, so you have the algorithmic engine, the reflective decider. Where does System 1 fit in his picture?
That's what he calls the autonomous mind. All those fast, automatic, subconscious processes. So autonomous, algorithmic, and reflective.
And this reflective mind, that sounds a lot like our potential System 3, acting as the supervisor.
It really does. Stanovich basically argues it's a meta-reasoning layer. It sets the big picture goals and can choose to initiate or override the lower systems.
So it's the bit that says, hold on, gut feeling. Maybe I should run the numbers on this one.
That's a good way to think about it. He emphasizes that the autonomous mind, the System 1, is the default setting. Its responses generally win out unless the algorithmic mind gets engaged.
And that engagement depends on the reflective mind stepping in.
Exactly. And this is where, as you said, it gets really interesting based on the source material. Things like your tendency to be thorough, or your willingness to question your own biases, or even just pausing to think about future consequences. Stanovich argues these aren't part of the algorithmic power, they're part of the reflective mind's disposition.
So rationality isn't just having a big engine, it's about having a good driver who knows when to use it.
That's the core insight, yes. His model shows how this kind of layered setup, with a reflective System 3 overseeing things, makes sense within cognitive science. And it helps explain why people vary so much in their judgment, even if they have similar algorithmic abilities. It's about cognitive management.
Okay, that's a really strong candidate then, an internal controller. But the sources didn't stop there, did they? There were other ideas. One seemed to shift focus outwards towards the social world.
Yes, that's another fascinating angle. This proposal suggests maybe System 3 isn't purely internal, but represents socially conditioned behavior. Think about how much our choices are shaped by cultural norms, group identity, shared values.
So departing from Kahneman's focus on the individual's internal processing, this is more about the mind operating within a society.
Precisely. The argument is, look, we don't make decisions in a vacuum. Intuition and logic are constantly interacting with our social context. So this proposed System 3 tries to capture those actions that aren't pure instinct and aren't pure calculation, but are driven by, say, internalized social rules or our identity as part of a group.
Interesting. So under this view, System 3 is almost like the social self-influencing decisions. It's not just about what do I think, but what do we do, or what's expected here.
That captures the essence of it, yeah. It's trying to build a better model for predicting how we act in real-world social situations.
Yeah.
Because often, what looks like a rational choice from an individual standpoint might actually be driven by a need to conform or uphold a group value or follow a social script. It's less about logic, more about belonging or social rules.
The sources did mention this is more of an emergent idea, right? So it reframes System 3 less as that internal CEO Stanovich described, and more as a powerful type of influence alongside intuition and logic.
Correct. A distinct force shaping our choices.
Okay, different direction again. The sources also talked about something uniquely human, our ability to think ahead, to imagine.
Ah, yes. Imagination and prospection. Our ability to mentally simulate the future, to play out scenarios in our heads, invent new possibilities, plan long term. It's quite remarkable when you think about it.
And the argument is that this kind of thinking doesn't neatly fit the System 1 or System 2 boxes.
That's the point raised in the sources, yeah. It's not really an instant gut feeling, is it? But it's also not always that slow, methodical, step-by-step logic either. It feels different, more creative perhaps.
How so?
Well, it involves blending memories, simulating different potential outcomes, even using empathy to guess how others might react. It's a synthesis. And the brain networks involved seem different too, like the default mode network.
And this capacity, this mental time travel and simulation, has informally been called System 3?
It has in some circles, because it feels like a distinct mode of cognition. It's about how we envision futures, consider alternatives, maybe even understand others' perspectives before making a choice.
So the core idea here is that our imaginative, future-oriented thinking could be a kind of System 3, guiding us by exploring possibilities beyond the immediate or the purely logical.
Exactly. It's less about calculation and more about creative simulation and foresight. The sources mentioned this connects to fields like behavioral economics or even marketing, where understanding how people imagine the future is key to influencing complex decisions.
Right. Okay, now, there's also mention of a more, shall we say, popularized or maybe less academic take on System 3 linked to wisdom.
Yes, the sources touched on concepts like Peter J. Webb's System 3 thinking. This frames it as a kind of um, wise, very considered decision-making style, especially when things are really complex or uncertain, and neither pure gut nor pure logic seems quite enough.
And what sorts of qualities did the source associate with that?
Things like deep focus, drawing on life experience, managing your emotions well, empathy, being genuinely open to different views. Basically, the toolkit for making sound judgments in messy, high-stakes situations.
The argument being that developing these qualities engages a higher mode of thinking.
That's the claim, yes.
Yeah.
That it helps you balance intuition and analysis more effectively, leading to better, wiser decisions.
And this seemed important. The sources also offered a critique here. As I was reading, I thought, hang on, are these truly a new system, or are they just things that help you use System 1 and System 2 better?
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly the critique highlighted. Many of those attributes like focus or emotional regulation could arguably be seen as supporting factors for the good use of S1 and S2 rather than a whole separate system.
Yeah, like being focused helps you stick with difficult System 2 analysis. Managing emotions might stop System 1 from going haywire. It feels more like prerequisites for good thinking, maybe?
Precisely. Focus could be part of S2's effortful control. Emotion regulation might tie into executive functions or even personality. So this wisdom view really shows the appeal of having a label for better decision-making, like System 3. But it also risks muddying the waters if it's not clearly pinned to distinct psychological mechanisms.
Makes sense. It captures a feeling, but maybe not a separate cognitive engine. Okay, one last perspective mentioned in the sources. This one sounded a bit more grounded in neuroscience, something up framing.
Right? Framing and context integration. This angle, drawing on ideas from people like Michael Ballet, emphasizes that our brain isn't just passively receiving information. It's constantly predicting, constantly generating hypotheses about the world.
Okay.
So in this view, System 3 isn't necessarily a decision controller, but more like the brain circuitry that does this constant work of aligning our internal models, our frames, with what's actually happening out there, and importantly, with how other people are framing things.
So it's about how we make sense of the situation, how we understand the context, and adjust our understanding based on feedback.
Exactly. It's about that continuous process of projecting expectations and updating them. It's fundamental to understanding context, and especially crucial for, say, collaborating effectively with others getting on the same page.
But why isn't that just part of System 2, the logical analysis of the situation?
Well, the argument here is that effective navigation, especially socially, needs more than just cold logic. It requires this ability to sort of resonate with the environment and with others, to quickly adjust when reality doesn't match your expectations, and to converge on a shared understanding. It's about dynamic attunement.
So Ballet suggests this system 3, this framing and resonance mechanism, works alongside S1 and S2 to allow for things like effective teamwork.
That's the idea. It's perhaps more of a theoretical perspective, but it links up with modern concepts like predictive processing and collective cognition. The core insight is that these aspects, framing, context sensitivity, social attunement, might be so critical and distinct from raw intuition or reason that they deserve their own recognition, maybe even as a System 3.
Wow, okay, so quite a range we've covered. From Stanovich's internal meta-controller to the influence of social norms, the power of imagination and future thinking, this idea of wisdom and experience, and finally, this predictive framing and context integration. Lots of different ways people are thinking about what might lie beyond S1 and S2.
That definitely paints a more complex picture than the simple dual process model.
So, wrapping up this part of the dive, what does this all mean for you listening right now? Why bother digging into these different takes on a potential System 3?
Well, I think it shows just how layered and, frankly, intricate our thinking really is.
Mm,
It's clearly more than just fast versus slow. And maybe understanding these potential other layers, the reflective, the social, the imaginative, gives you new ways to think about and maybe even improve your own decision making.
I agree. And it sets us up perfectly for the next deep dive, looking at the preview and your sources. We need to really grapple with the evidence. Are these proposed System 3s genuinely distinct? Or are they clever repackaging of things we already study, like metacognition, thinking about thinking, or executive functions, that brain management system? We'll get into that debate about originality versus relabeling and try to pull out some practical takeaways. Definitely. So until then, here's something to mull over based on everything we just discussed. Think about a complex decision you made recently, something that wasn't just a snap judgment or simple calculation. Can you see any hints of these different System 3 ideas in how you approached it? Did you consciously step back and reflect on how to think about it? Were social expectations a big factor? Did you spend time vividly imagining different outcomes? Did you rely on a kind of hard-won experience or wisdom? Or was it more about trying to get the right frame on the problem, understanding all the context? Did any of that feel different from just your gut or your logical side working alone? Something to think about.